Welcome to I Wish I Knew, a podcast by DisruptED TV where insightful and reflective educators talk about a situation where they found themselves saying, "Boy, I wish I knew that." Today we're talking with Robb, principal in Virginia. As you know, this is a show where educators share a time where they jumped into something and wished there was one thing they could have known that would have helped out. Evan, what story do you want to share with us today?
Well, first of all, I am so excited to be on your podcast and glad that you are spreading a message to educators all around the country. And so first of all, I thank you for that. I thank you also for working with DisruptED TV. They are doing a wonderful job to promote education, positive education all around the country. So this is a really good question. And you were kind enough to email me before our podcast, and I've given it a little thought. And I'm going to probably present a fairly roundabout journey here relating to that question, but hopefully it will all tie together for our listeners. You know, one of the things that I wish I knew goes all the way back to when I was in middle school, and it has to do with mindset. When I was a math student in 6th and 7th grade, I had a very fixed mindset about my abilities to do mathematics. And that was reinforced in several different ways. It was reinforced by a teacher who believed that kids could either do math or couldn't do math. And I very quickly fought on the side of kids that couldn't do math. Mm-hmm. And it resonated a little bit through people that I knew within my life who felt that in general, you know, I didn't come from a family of brilliant mathematicians. And saw myself as a student who was interested in history, a student that was interested in language arts, but not necessarily a student who was interested in mathematics. Now, my experience may relate to people that are listening right now, and it certainly might relate to you, and it goes into the power of a teacher. And a teacher can change the trajectory, you know, of a student's life, often by their belief, you know, their sense of efficacy and their belief that they can help students become successful. And I was fortunate enough, just like I'm sure many others were, to eventually bump into a teacher that helped me understand that mathematics is not necessarily something that, you know, you have a gene for. It is something that may come easier to some people than others, but other people it might be a little bit harder. But with hard work, with appropriate support, with good interventions, and changing my belief from a belief that I can't do math to a belief that I can do math was a real game changer for me.
Evan, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Evan, do you think that comes from the encouragement that you get? Because I was in a similar situation as a math student, only I had a sister who she just dreamt math. I found it incredible. But through encouragement, and that willingness to not give up, I also had a mind shift. Would you say that that's an important role that we can play?
I would say that it's one of the most significant roles that an educator can play. You know, if I'm sure some of your listeners have read some of the research from John Hattie out of New Zealand. He does this really interesting meta-analysis of things that impact learning and make a difference within a school. And his research points very, very strong to the importance of efficacy. That's personal efficacy by a teacher. And of course, efficacy defined as, you know, the belief that you alone can make a difference for a child because of your abilities to be reflective of your instruction and your belief that a child can learn. And then also to the concept of collective efficacy, which is an entire building feeling that way. Yeah, and so I think that when that's in place, that has the potential to change a path for a student. Mm-hmm. So you have two students and one student who falls into a classroom similar to the one that I first described. And if by happenstance they never find a teacher who believes in them and supports them and helps them be successful, they may never see themselves as a math student. And they may perpetuate math anxiety, which is something that exists very strong all across the world, actually. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it is that significant. There's no doubt about it.
Mm-hmm. Can you give me a specific example, Evan, when you saw this either in your practice? I know you described it as a personal journey. Can you give us an example of when you were able to see this in your building or in your instructional practice?
Yeah, I sure can, and I appreciate you kind of taking me down that road. It shows a lot in schools, and the best example that I can give has to do with change and how change is promoted within a school. So let me wrap that around technology. So one of the things that I have seen, is that technology is certainly being integrated more and more in schools all across America. So there needs to be conversations about what that looks like. Technology that replaces a worksheet with doing a worksheet-like activity is not necessarily something that's highly interesting to me. Technology that's transformative, that enhances learning, it is. But that requires people to consider a change in practice. Now, what I have seen is often younger teachers who come into my school, they have grown up, they are digital natives, they're very comfortable with using technology and quickly see it as part of their daily pedagogical practice. But sometimes veteran teachers who've been in the business for a long time, it's new to them. And that creates an interesting situation for teachers. So if they have a fixed mindset about their ability to use technology, they may resist it, or they may avoid it, do workarounds, things of that nature. So the role of an administrator, and one thing that I've learned from my personal experience is, how do I encourage a growth mindset within my building to get people to be willing to try, be willing to experiment, and be open to learning new things.
I think that's a challenge. I'm on that veteran end of the spectrum, and I have had, again, I've been in the same system for a while, and I have not had the pleasure of seeing new teachers coming in who are these digital natives, really able to use technology in a transformative manner. My unfortunate experience is that they're still teaching the way I used to teach. And that really frustrates me. So I think that sometimes as building educators, there are sophisticated learners across the spectrum. And I'm seen as a technology leader in my building, and I've worked hard for that. So how do you make sure that you embrace the spectrum of technology experts?
Well, I think one thing as an administrator is, you have to do it yourself. And, being a cheerleader from the sidelines is not enough. So it's important for the administrator to model what they hope staff will be willing to embrace within the building also. So, in other words, you certainly can't be a champion of technology and never spend any time working with technology. You can't be a promoter of growth mindset, but all of your actions demonstrate fixed mindset. It simply doesn't work that way. So that's the first step to kind of having it flourish in the building. The other thing is, it gets a little more complicated. It has to do with culture, and has to do with risk taking, and has to do with fear. If people are afraid to try something because of either some sort of urban myth that lives within the building, or because of actual facts, people tend to hunker down and they're not willing to try. So not only does the administrator need to live and exemplify growth mindset, but they need to communicate an environment where people are encouraged to be creative, where it's okay to take a risk, and that fear of reprisal is not something that's part of the modus operandi of the building.
Is there a strategy that you've used to help people understand what other people are using in the building? In other words, I guess saying, having a teacher model what they've done, say maybe at a faculty meeting.
Yep, do faculty meeting shares, do peer observation, where encourage teachers to go and observe certain practices within other classrooms in the building, which is actually really interesting, because what I found with that is sometimes the math teacher their inclination will be to observe a math teacher, but sometimes it can be really beneficial for a math teacher to observe a teacher in a completely different discipline, just to observe in the case of our conversation, maybe how technology is being used into their classroom,
Mm-hmm.
and then have a reflective opportunity to think about how that could fit into their room.
Mm-hmm.
I
Has
also,
that been successful for
yeah,
you?
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. The other thing that's been successful, is getting people to, we look at a lot of articles, we do a lot of article studies, we do a lot of book studies as a staff to learn how to think differently about what we do. And you alluded to something a few minutes ago about some more traditional types of classrooms that you've seen, even though there's a lot of change going on around us. And I think people need to understand in a lot of different ways how things can look different. It's one thing to look at a picture, it's another thing to look at a video, but it gets more interesting if there's article studies and people are observing and they're seeing in a lot of different ways how things can look different. So I'll give you a really simple example here. There are not a lot of professions where you could take someone from 100 years ago and move them right now into the present, and it would look very much the same.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think about business. Can you think of any business that 1918, if someone magically teleported to 2018, that they could walk into the business and know exactly what to do?
Mm-hmm.
But I would say that there are a lot of schools in America where someone would know what to do. They would come into the classroom, sit down, be quiet, and wait to be told what to do. And what I would say, and one of the messages that I like to communicate, is that things do need to be different. Our kids learn different. We're preparing them for a world that it's very hard for us at times to even conceptualize what it's going to look like. But the question is, from an administrator standpoint, is how do you get people to think differently and to experiment and to try different things? And most importantly, how do you create an environment, incorporating growth mindset and incorporating, and working on building that healthy culture so people are comfortable to try?
Mm-hmm. And your suggestions?
My suggestions are pretty simple, but they resonate with me, and I communicate them a lot with people. And one of them is that if you want to bring innovation into your life, at times you need to disrupt your routine. Because one thing that I've seen over and over again, and you know this, the classic definition of insanity is repeating the same thing over and over again and expecting different results.
Mm-hmm.
So disrupting one's routine is a good thing, but the administrator needs to model that. The administrator needs to encourage that and let people know that it's safe to do that, because sometimes when people do that, it doesn't work out the way that they want it to, but other times magic can happen. My other recommendation is to choose positivity. I think that being positive is a choice, just as I think being negative is a choice. And I think our kids and certainly deserve positive, enthusiastic educators. And I always encourage people to make that choice every single day. And then my last takeaway is that your mindset does matter. Fixed mindset is not a good spot to be in. It's certainly not a good spot to be in for an educator. And it's not a good spot for children to be in, because it limits their thinking about what they can do and certainly what they can be. So in a nutshell, got to disrupt if you want to bring innovation into your life. Choose positivity, and your mindset does matter, and I encourage people to choose a growth mindset.
I think those are great takeaways, and I think that anyone listening to this, I hope it's inspirational, because as a teacher, I'm in the classroom, and those are the things that I have to keep reminding myself of. So, you know what I didn't get to? We're in the piece still. What's the thing you wish you knew?
The thing that I wished I knew was, I wish that I knew that my choices, my thinking, could have a lot of bearing on what I become and how I work with people. So I wish that I knew that a growth mindset was not only something that could be impactful for my learning, but something that can change the trajectory and the direction of an entire staff.
Perfect.
I wish I knew that when I first started administration, and I wish I knew that when I had a math teacher who certainly didn't communicate that to me.
Perfect. All right, excellent. So I want to thank you for spending time with us today. We've been talking with Evan Robb, and I'm very grateful for the time that you spent with us. And we hope you'll join us again when we talk about I Wish I Knew on DisruptED TV podcast.